Pokemon Legends Arceus is now just over 1 year old, and a lot has happened in the Pokemon franchise since its release. We've had Diamond and Pearl remakes, and witnessed the beginning of a new generation of Pokemon with the release of Scarlet and Violet, in which we have surpassed over 1,000 total Pokemon. After having extensively played through Legends Arceus and still playing to this day, I would easily put it in my top 3 of all time Pokemon series releases. And while I would highly recommend and promote the positives of this game to anyone who feels the need to play Pokemon, but not in the all reliable way, I'll also be aware of some of the things that were disappointing or just outright sucked. And that's what I want to talk about today. If you do enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. Without further ado, this is Pokemon Legends Arceus 1 year later. Pokemon Legends Arceus is considered to be a main entry in the Pokemon series and is also a fully complete standalone game where you can catch everything possible in just one game. While the third entry in a trio of main series games being released from Pokemon Yellow up to Platinum, I still consider these games to be variants or counterparts of their previous releases. The main reason is because they still had unobtainable Pokemon that had to be caught in their previous versions to complete the Pokedex, and while they oftentimes had more features, it's not really considered a complete game as such. The game also made it easier for solo players to catch unobtainable Pokemon, i.e. those who don't play with an internet connection or have friends to trade with in the first place. It is a fully complete game where you can also obtain the mythicals such as Shaman and Darkrai, and you can finally and legitimately catch Arceus. As for support of the game, you could argue that it wasn't well supported post-release in terms of there not being many updates for the game, as the most recent update came less than 2 months since the game's release. Within these few updates, they mainly fixed bugs which I don't recall having experienced for myself, except for maybe the odd game crash. The biggest update, however, was their 1.1 update, otherwise known as the Daybreak update, which came a month after the release. It added new requests, the Eternal Battle Reverie, new battles added to the training grounds, new Photographer Studio features, higher difficulty Balloon Race and Coronet Highlands, more available options when buying from Ginter at the Ginkgo Guild, additional special berry harvest at the farm, but of course, the most important part of the update, which was the massive mass outbreaks. Like I said previously that the game perhaps wasn't continuously supported, I would also make the strong argument that there wasn't much need for further support after the game's release because they had done almost everything that needed to be done for the game to be totally finished. It's possible that the Daybreak update was meant to be included prior to the game's launch, and the developers didn't have enough time to fully implement it. However, development of the game took 3 years and started even before Sword and Shield's release, so it's hard to say whether they had enough time to include that specific content before release in the first place. But let's start talking about the actual game, and we'll start off by talking about the Sinnoh/Hisui region. Before Legends Arceus was even a thing, I had already loved the Sinnoh region for what it was. I loved the games which were set in that region and the generation of Pokemon as well. It's probably my most played generation of games to this day. When I first saw the artwork for the region, there was something about the design of the region having Spear Pillar and Mount Coronet as the center point, seeming to make it clear that this peak, the highest in all of Sinnoh, is where the story would presumably reach its conclusion. There was also the little details that added to the feel of the region, such as the church-like building in Hearthome City, the haunted mansion in Eterna Forest with its ghostly presence, or Turnback Cave to encounter Giratina. And even though it's only accessible in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the Sinnoh Ruins, where if you went along with an event Arceus, you could gain one of the 3 legendary Pokemon. Sinnoh Ruins being a halfway point between Sinnoh and Johto really helps tie the region with the rest of the Pokemon world. These details and others really made me ask the question that I never asked about regions in other Pokemon games. Why? Why was this church built, and to whom or what are the people worshipping? Why did the mansion in the forest become dilapidated and abandoned? Why were the Sinnoh Ruins built in the first place? Playing Legends Arceus and strolling through some of these areas can help visualize how the modern day version of Sinnoh came to be. Traveling through certain places, for example the forest in Eterna, makes you think this would be a nice place to set up a mansion and live in this serenity, or this tiny settlement will soon become a thriving city. The next thing I want to talk about is the story. Before the game even begins, you're seemingly sent back in time by the god of Pokemon themselves, and for what seems like an unknown reason initially. Through the course of the story, you gain the trust of some of the characters and really feel like you've worked hard to earn your keep in Jubilite Village, having gone from an outsider who fell from the sky to one of the best Pokemon wielders to work for the Survey Corps. I found myself very immersed in the story, and while on the surface it seems like the quests were just defeat the noble, earn enough points to rank up, move on to the next area, repeat a few times, beat the game, the end. However, within the main quests, they were varied in terms of the characters you meet and the quests they would assign you on in each of the regions. And with a bunch of small side quests, you always had something to be working towards, while gaining the experience needed to rank up to the next star rank and move on to the next area without really the need to grind too hard. It really adds to this idea of you being mistrusted to begin with, but being relied upon to complete tasks that other people are afraid of or incapable of doing themselves. The fact that most of the NPCs you talk to in Jubilife Village and elsewhere all have unique names, even the ones who sit there and contribute nothing to the story. Now, granted, it's probably not that many in total, but I imagine it took a bit of time to name each individual NPC. That's just a small detail that I personally think goes unappreciated. As far as the main NPCs you interact with throughout the story, most of the characters are seemingly descendants from characters in previous games, which makes for a degree of familiarity. Having characters that are more recognizable helps make it easier for us to tune into the story. There is one standout part to the story that I feel like I need to give its own special mention, and that's to do with interactions with a specific character. If you still haven't played this game and you don't want anything spoiled for you, then stop listening for the next couple minutes. However, it has been a year, so I think you'll know what I'm talking about when I mention their name. This character in particular is Volo. Volo is something else. His betrayal of being the baddie in this game is something that I never even considered, nor did I even expect. I feel like this game deliberately hid the fact that there was going to be a villain in this story at all compared to previous games. It was always made clear, or at least evident, that there was a bad guy you had to stop in the first place. Had I made a guess as to what the enemy of the game would be, I probably wouldn't have picked a person. Instead, I would have gone with a thing, and that thing being nature. It's made clear that the majority of people don't go outside of the walls of the village unless they absolutely have to, and people are generally terrified of the wilderness. But back to the subject of Volo. His resemblance to Cynthia, I think, is what made him so trustworthy to begin with. Again, going back to that point I made about the familiar faces. But there were numerous clues that helped warn you about Volo's true intentions. He teaches you about the backstrike technique to foreshadow about his backstabbing much later in the game. He knows a lot about the myths and legends of Hisui, seemingly a little too much knowledge. And of course gets a little too excited when he finds out about you collecting the plates, which Volo wanted for his ultimate grand plan to meet Arceus. And when it comes to the grand reveal that Volo is the bad guy after all, I was met with a mighty shock. This epic encounter met with another twist of Volo summoning Giratina, and then another twist on top of that when it changes into its origin form mid-battle. Fighting all 8 of these Pokemon in a row without respite left me feeling something that I never have felt in a Pokemon game, and I wasn't the only one.
But that might kill. Alright. Alright. What? Huh? Okay. So a Pokemon fight with 3 waves. That's normal.
So yeah, I would rate the story and the performance of Pokemon Legends Arceus a perfect 10 out of 10. Except for one thing. One major thing that I think just really takes the sting out of just how good this game is. Since Sword and Shield's release, and maybe even as far back as Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee came out, there has been a growing voice coming from the Pokemon community about something that is lacking in their games: spoken dialogue. It's getting harder and harder with each new game that comes out to have some inspirational message from your friends or some rant about creating a new world just be reduced to nothing more than lines of text. Because of this, there's no emotion, there's no drive, there's no ambition behind it. The delivery falls flat. For those moments where we as players are supposed to be at the edge of our seat, I feel like it takes away from the impact of the story if we have to read the dialogue on the screen. I can't look at what's happening on the screen and the text at the bottom at the same time. I noticed this was the worst in Scarlet and Violet. During the section of the story where you begin exploring Area Zero and you're slowly descending down with your friends alongside you, there's dialogue and interaction between them that continuously moves along the bottom without any inputs from the player. I haven't actually absorbed any of what was said between them, as I was too busy looking for new Pokemon to catch down there and mesmerized by the complex beauty of the Area Zero in the first place. I know this issue is choose to do with different games, but I think my point is still valid. I think it's high time that we had voice lines in main series Pokemon games. Because of this, I've decided to do something about it. A project that I'm currently working on is to create a production of Legends Arceus where the story is retold, but each of the main characters will have voice acting. If you would consider yourself to have an interesting voice, or know someone who is, or just like Legends Arceus in the first place, and you want to try your hand at auditioning for some of these characters, I'll provide all the information in the description below. I would really love for this little project to come to life, but it obviously can't be possible without the help of others. So check it out, and even if it's not for you, please feel free to share it in your own communities as well. The next thing I want to talk about is the catching and crafting. Catching and crafting in Legends Arceus is probably why people call it the Breath of the Wild of Pokemon. I found it a really simple process where each craftable item is only 2 or 3 items, and those resources are not that hard to come by. If anything, you'll find yourself with more items than you'll ever need. Although, having a different way of being able to catch Pokemon without instigating battles is something that I experienced to be something quite difficult to begin with, but becomes easy enough to master. Yet still to this day, I will throw out a Pokemon instead of a Pokeball or vice versa. Having a very limited backpack space to start with means that you must think very carefully about the items you bring with you when venturing out. You can't bring everything all the time. Crafting on the go is a nice quality of life feature that I feel keeps the speed of the gameplay up high. On top of this, the pace of combat and battles and the rate at which Pokemon appear during space-time distortions and mass outbreaks makes the exciting parts often frantic, but complements the oftentimes regular quietness when just exploring casually. And even in those times when you're just exploring and come across a shiny Pokemon, I panic immediately because I don't want to ruin the opportunity of missing out on a shiny or scaring it away. Which brings me on to the subject of shiny Pokemon. Legends Arceus became notoriously easy to hunt for shiny Pokemon, that everyone was doing it. I was doing it, you were doing it, your brothers and sisters, mums and dads, your pets, the president, and even God himself was doing it. One method in order to have increased odds of encountering a shiny was the mass outbreaks, which I feel were handled very well in this game. If you were wanting to hunt a specific shiny Pokemon in Legends Arceus, it felt like you had a certain amount of control over what the mass outbreaks were likely going to be. For comparison, in games like Scarlet and Violet and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the Pokemon that could appear in mass outbreaks were not that many, nor occurred that often, as they rotate every 24 hours. Granted, you could fast forward your clock to the next day if you wanted to, but it's not the intended way of playing the game, so I would disregard that method. In Legends Arceus, when you leave Jubilife Village, the guard standing watch will tell you if there are mass outbreaks happening, where they are, and what Pokemon it was. If you didn't want to shiny hunt for any of the Pokemon that's shown to you, you can leave the village and come back and keep repeating the process until your preferred Pokemon appears. Then with the Daybreak update came the massive mass outbreaks, which allowed for even more opportunities to catch different Pokemon at increased shiny rates, as it is essentially a limited time bunch of smaller mass outbreaks. When entering one of these areas, you'll see a bunch of question marks on the map indicating where these outbreaks are. However, if you talk to May and give her Munchlax 5 Agawaf berries, you can suddenly see all of the available Pokemon. If you're a shiny hunter, you can pause the map and plot your destination with which shiny Pokemon you wish to hunt for. There's even a chance that evolved Pokemon not normally found in the wild could appear. So if you're in Cobalt Coastlands and you don't feel like getting a Basculin to inflict 294 recoil damage in order to evolve it, you could just wait to see if one is likely to appear via a massive mass outbreak instead. While over the years it has become easier to catch, hatch and trade for shinies, the numbers of Legends Arceus really shows this when compared to other recent games. For example, while playing Legends Arceus, the maximum shiny rate that you can get is about 1 in 128. Sword and Shield's max shiny rates are 1 in 455. Scarlet and Violet's 1 in 512, and Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was 1 in 273, but that's with a 30 plus catch combo. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl's maximum odds are 1 in 99. However, in order to reach these odds, you need to string together a total of 40 or more Pokemon caught or defeated using the Pokefinder, which I find to be less consistent and very tedious. Having said that, if your catch combo is only a 39, it's still only 1 in 200, which is still quite a bit lower than Pokemon Legends Arceus. No matter what game it is, and how good the odds may be for any of those games, anytime I hear that noise, I always gasp and freeze trying to determine what shiny it is. So it's safe to say that for me, the novelty of getting a shiny hasn't worn off. Another method that can help with increasing shiny odds is with the completion of the Pokedex. When a Pokemon's research rank reaches level 10, it can increase the odds of shiny Pokemon appearing in the wild, and it further increases when the page is fully complete. You do this by completing research tasks tailored to each Pokemon. I am a bit of a completionist, and if the Pokedex didn't have the vast amount of research tasks and various ways to complete the research level of each Pokemon, the game would be lacking a lot of depth and replayability. This game is probably where I spent the most time looking through the Pokedex compared to other games. You could passively complete some of the research tasks by using certain moves or defeating X number of species, or you could be more conscientious by actively combining these efforts using a specific move like Raichu's Iron Tail to knock out Pokemon that have to be defeated with steel moves. Also having the ability to sort the listings in the Pokedex in different orders, such as Dex number, alphabetical order, or research completion, and also being able to filter the Pokedex to show only Pokemon in each area, makes the Pokedex a very practical tool. I don't really have much bad to say about the Pokedex, although I haven't heard many people complain about the Pokedex in general through all the games. Except for maybe some people complain that the Pokedex is an overcomplicated catch counter, but it's certainly not the case here. The combat system was perhaps in need of a shake-up, even if it was only for one game. Pokemon can deal more damage, but they can also take more damage, yet it still retains the turn-based element that is a core staple of the Pokemon franchise. However, with the addition of the agile and strong style moves, it can help with being more tactical in battle. At least that's what I thought it would have been. I found myself multiple times getting frustrated with how turn priority works. I understand the concept of agile and strong style moves that can make your next attack more or less likely to happen, but there have been times when I use agile style on a Pokemon's move and it would show that I can attack twice. But sometimes then when I go to attack, it doesn't seem to be the case and I might only get one move instead of the two that I felt like I was promised, and it feels like it's never explained to me why this is the case. Also, with Pokemon's attacks doing more damage means when it comes to fights against other Pokemon, it was always usually the faster, more attack focused Pokemon with great coverage of different types that seemed to be the one to come out on top, which kind of throws the format of being tactical in battle out the window. But with the nature of the game being quite fast paced, having slower battle systems would interrupt the flow of the game massively. I feel like the combat formula is something that isn't going to appeal to everyone. I can see how the new implementation makes it seem more action-like and less turn-based, but the latter of which is what has brought the most success to the franchise, so you can see why the developers didn't want to stray too far from that element. I've been talking for so long now, and I'm only getting around to talking about the designs of the Pokemon themselves. I like the new Pokemon. That's pretty much it. The Hisui forms of the Pokemon were refreshing designs, I feel, and the new evolutions were also pretty good, except for maybe the legendaries. When I saw origin form of Dialga and Palkia, I did feel a bit disappointed by their designs, but having played through the story and learned that if you took certain parts of Dialga, Palkia and Giratina's body and put them together, you could almost make a rough version of Arceus, which kind of warmed me up to their designs a little bit. This thing? I refuse to acknowledge this thing exists. Putting everything that I have said so far, I think the question now must be asked, what's next for Pokemon Legends? It's unknown at this time whether a sequel or another Legends game is in the works or not. If it took 3 years to develop this game, assuming they started development for a new game from the middle of last year, it could be 2025 before we would get a new game. A lot of fan speculation and demand is for a Legends Celebi in a Johto setting. It could be a direct sequel to Arceus where you're forced to flee Sinnoh for some perilous reason. All of your Pokemon are left behind, so you have to start again. You seek refuge in Sinnoh ruins and emerge on the other side in this similar era setting for Johto. You help to set up life there in various settlements and teach others how to battle with Pokemon. You could even witness the events of the towers being burnt down and the birth of the legendary beasts. Space-time distortions could still be a thing, as Celebi, the time-traveling Pokemon, could actually be the cause of these events in the first place. These ideas are coming from my own demand for wanting more. I liked almost everything the game had to offer and I was left with wanting more of the same and more new things too. I suppose all I can do now is wait. I know that there's a lot more that I could have talked about, but if you would like to see me do a follow-up video, I'd be happy to oblige with any questions or topics you want me to talk about this game. That's going to do it for this 1 year review of Pokemon Legends Arceus video. If you have made it this far, comment bananas, so I know that you actually did get this far. Let me know in the comments as well what your opinion is of Legends Arceus as a game. And would you like to see another game in the series? If so, where would it be set? Thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you soon in the next video.